listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
We're back, folks. Last week we missed an episode due to an interview reschedule, but we're back. So thanks so much for choosing to listen to my Straight to Video podcast. On today's show, I get to bring you a really great chat I had with musician and fellow VHS enthusiast, Jake Popyura of the band Supermilk. Now, Jake's band have a brand new album, High Precision Ghosts, out on August 9th, which we chat about, along with the band's previous record, 4x3, which they released an actual VHS version, which I was eager to learn all about. This, of course, leads us into Jake's memories of renting movies during the 1990s, and he shares some great stories and influences from back then, which have made it into his present-day music journey. We also speak about his recent life-changing diagnosis with Motor Neurone Disease and how he's been adapting to the everyday new life challenges something as huge as this brings. So this really is a fascinating and important episode of the podcast. As always, the Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. Affinity Photo is used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, so please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's dive into this week's chat. If you want to learn more about Jake and Supermilk, then head on over to supermilk.band. And if you want to learn more or support the awareness of MND, Motor Neurone Disease, then please visit the MNDA, mndassociation.org. But right now, please enjoy my straight to video talk with the awesome Jake Popyura. I realise we've got a mutual friend, uber handsome bass player Nick Kent.
Oh, really? You know Nick?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I've known Nick for years and years and years. We played in a band together called Tat.
Oh, you were in the band together, was you? I didn't realise that.
Yeah. We've toured all over the world together, and we've spent a lot of time in sort of smelly vans and buses and kind of in each other's pockets. I saw him when Supermilk was on tour a couple of months ago now. He came to the Oxford show we played, and that's the first time I've seen him in ages because he's been at sea doing his sort of session bass playing for the the cruise ships and stuff.
I guess that's a contrast to what you guys used to be doing back in the day. Because I remember the name. When was it? Like the early 2000s?
I think I joined in 2006. Me and Nick went to college together because I moved up to London to do, study music, and Nick was at the same college. So even before we knew each other, we got kind of thrown into live performance groups together to kind of jam together and stuff. And then when he was asked, like, oh, do you know any drummers who can join this band? He kind of remembered me from those and my kind of style of playing, which was a lot faster and slightly more reckless than a lot of the other kind of very buttoned up drummers that were there. Yeah, we spent like 5 or 6 years in that band together. Yeah, touring all around the States and Europe and stuff. And yeah, we had some really nice little adventures together. How do you know Nick?
I know him through like mutual friends. He's really good friends with a guy called Danny Gruff and Dave Giles.
Oh, Danny, yeah.
Yeah, so me and Danny have toured together quite a few times.
Oh, that's funny.
And Nick kind of kept getting thrown into the circle and all this kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you know Dave Giles as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was at the Oxford show too. That was the first time I've seen him in many years. But yeah, they're all really good dudes.
Yeah, they're like top draw. All of them are just wicked.
Oh, that's cool. I'm glad that's good. He's much love for Nick.
So you mentioned you played drums in that band. You also played drums in your band Doe prior to Supermilk.
Yeah.
Now in Supermilk, you're bassist and vocals. And I guess you've been playing music since you were like super young. Have you always had a really good hand in picking up different instruments and finding your way around them?
Yeah, pretty much. Like my dad is sort of like a hobbyist musician and always has been. So from when I was really, really young, he just had like guitars and keyboards and sort of, analog recording ear. Like he was really into home recording and like Porter Studios and 4-tracks and all that kind of stuff. So from when I was really young, my mum and dad were kind of encouraging me to just like have a go on stuff and just like leaving the stuff around the house. And like if I showed interest in it, they would sort of encourage that. And when I was old enough, my dad taught me how to use the 4-track and kind of record my own stuff. So from when I was super young, I've been sort of doing one-man band type things because I'm an only child as well. And I grew up in quite a remote bit of Essex where there wasn't like loads of mates immediately close by. It was kind of countryside. So I kind of used to amuse myself by just multi-tracking and kind of making a band because I didn't have a band. So I was like, oh, well, I've got to learn how to play all these things so I can kind of scratch that itch because I'm not going to wait for any other motherfucker. I'm too impatient for that.
What did you do about drums back then?
Because we lived in the middle of nowhere, like luckily there was like a lot of space and stuff and not many neighbours to annoy. And I think when I said like I wanted to start playing drums, I think I was like 6 or 7 or something. My mum and dad were like, oh, this is going to be a fucking flash in the pan. We'll see how much he annoys us for that for a while before we get him even just like a tiny little Mickey Mouse drum to fuck around with. And I was so persistent and I ended up setting up pots and pans and using chopsticks from like the takeaway just to learn. And they were like, he seems to actually want to do this. So we're like, but I still play. My partner, Soph, and I, we play in a band called Fella Set together as well, alongside Supermilk. I do that. So I'm still just about playing drums. Like my sort of physical situation at the moment is sort of like limiting me. You know, I used to be able to play lots of sort of fast punk and hardcore. That was my sort of wheelhouse. And like these days, I'm not quite as physically able to do that, but I'm still keeping a hand in there and we're still playing shows together and stuff. So that's, still trying to do it.
How did you record then, early days, with the 4-track on drums? Did you actually record a live kit?
My dad had a drum machine as well. So I think I started out just like doing the beats on a drum machine. But then when Cubase came along, or when I got shown Cubase by like older friends who were also into the same thing, then I just started sort of just sticking a couple of random mics on the kit and figuring out. So it's just usually just one mic over the whole thing.
Get it in the right place. It catches a bit of everything.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot to be said for one mic drum sounds. Like I think sometimes if it is placed in, right, and depending on what kind of vibe you're going for, I think you can get a really nice drum sound with like minimal mics. It gives it that kind of nice ambient, slightly trashy sound, which really suits some stuff. So I was doing that kind of thing and just like went from doing it in a very sort of rudimentary, bare bones way to gradually working my way up and thinking like, right, how do you actually mic a full kit? But it was a lot of that just all throughout my adolescence, just trying to sort of stave off the boredom by doing little music bits and pieces.
How did you find that transition from being behind the kit to being up front now, you're bass player and singer?
It's weird. It was like, because I feel like the vast majority of my sort of musical, like quote unquote bunny ears career, if you can call it that. I mean, like, not that I've been fucking paid a penny for it, but like,
it's your journey.
The career / journey / fuck around years, which is my entire life. It was a weird transition because like even just the idea of standing up on stage and not being sat down behind a fortress of metal and wood, because it's quite a safe space to occupy when you're behind the drums, because the front person can do their thing, entertain the crowd, and you've got that protection around you. So I was usually on like drums and vocals, so I even felt comfortable talking over the mic quite a bit and doing that kind of thing, because I was like, well, who can get me really, because I'm behind this shield. But then it was a bit of a transition when it came to being up front. But I don't know, I found it really fun. Like after the first couple of shows, I sort of felt like I relaxed into it quite a bit. And now it's just like a old pair of shoes, slipping those on.
What do you normally write songs on? Is it guitar or however the idea comes to you?
Yeah, it's kind of, it usually comes as like, it'll usually just pop into my head like a vocal melody and like the chords that go underneath it. Everything sort of comes at the same time, which I guess is like the benefit of having played lots of different instruments for quite a few years, is like the songs start quite fully formed in my head. So then it's just a case of sort of getting them down on guitar and vocals, just like as a voice note or something. And then as the bits come along, like just random voice notes of like the bridge and the chorus and then eventually sitting down to sort of piece them all together in a sort of more like formal demo.
Super, man. Because you've got your brand new album, High Precision Ghosts, which is out pretty soon, August the 9th. You've already done some live dates, though. Did you get a chance to try out much new material?
Yeah, we've been playing pretty much almost exclusively new material. So my partner, Soph, used to play in Supermilk, but then she kind of took a step back at the end of last year to focus on, she's got lots of different creative projects generally, aside from music, but she's got, different bands she does. So she took a step back, and then Charlie, our most recent addition, she joined sort of in place of Soph. So originally we just wanted to do new album stuff because that was all that we'd learned, because we just spent so much time focusing on like learning the songs for the new record and then recording them. The first bunch of shows we did, we were like, let's not fuck around. Let's not kind of like put our foot in it by doing old stuff and then forgetting the new stuff. Let's just keep it simple. But then for the last tour we did, which was just 5 shows a couple of months ago, we introduced like 2 old ones. So 80% of the set at the moment is just like stuff off the new record. And luckily, like we did it in such record time. Like we recorded it in February and March over like a couple of weekends. And then at the end of March, we got it mixed and mastered. And then 1st of April, it was straight off to the pressing plant. So then it came back in time for the shows we did. So yeah, even though the record's not officially out yet, we had the copies of the record to be able to kind of sell, which was really, it was just, we haven't like done, like the last full album was 4x3, which came out 2 years ago this month. And aside from a couple of singles and like a few bits and pieces, we haven't had anything like physical to sell for ages. So it was just really exciting to go out and do like a run of shows with like a brand new record and to be able to sell that ahead of the release.
That's a whole super fast turnaround from like recording. And so that when you listen to that in the future, it's like a real time capsule, that is.
Yeah, for sure. I think much to the chagrin of the rest of the band, I get really itchy feet. I get quite impatient. Once I've got a bunch of songs written, I'm so excited about them that I just want them recorded and like I want the finished product in my hand like yesterday. I'm always just like, right, we can do this. Let's schedule this. Like, it's going to be really tight, but we'll record it in a month. We'll get it mixed in 2 days, mastered to the pressing plant. I'll do all of the artwork like 7 years before we start recording and blah, blah. But yeah, it worked out really well. I still can't believe we didn't even have the album recorded, until February this year. So the fact that it was like recorded and now it's out in August, it's like, that's sick. I love that.
That's awesome. You mentioned your previous album, 4x3. That was brought to my attention by my buddy Rixie from the band The Stayawakes.
Yeah, I've chatted to him a bit via the Video Club and like a couple of the other like VHS collecting groups.
Rixie was like, you got to get Jake on your show. His band released their last album on VHS. And I was like, how'd you release an album on VHS? But you actually did it, and it was like the audio album accompanied by visuals to go with the songs. Tell us a little bit how that whole concept came together.
Well, I mean, much like yourself, I'm a big fan of VHS as a format and also just tape collecting and just the whole experience of, it was such an integral part of my sort of childhood and adolescence, like the whole experience of going to rent tapes. And then when consumer electronics got good enough to be able to make stuff at home, so you could make your own sort of VHS compilation tapes. And I was really obsessed with the idea of, like making the sleeves on the computer and then printing them out. So like having almost like a home collection of like DIY tapes that I'd made, bootlegging movies and stuff like that. But then I think it kind of kicked up a notch when you and I are probably of a similar age. Do you remember the band Green Jelly?
Three Little Pigs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they were a huge sort of influence. I mean, a really goofy fucking band, but like they were such a massive influence on me when I was a kid when that came out. And the fact that they released the entire album first on VHS, and it was like a video album of like the songs, and each one had its own individual video. And then it wasn't until they got played on the radio that people kind of pestered them to make a CD and vinyl, soundtrack of the album. And I've always really wanted to do a sort of similar thing. I mean, it wasn't quite the same. I was so into that as a concept. They did like 2 VHS tapes in the end, and I've got them both on VHS, still whack them on for friends sometimes when they come over and they're like, please turn this off. What the fuck? Why are you making me watch this? It's awful. Yeah, I just really liked that as a concept, the idea of having just like a visual. And also like a band called Deerhoof did it as well with one of their records. It wasn't VHS, but it was just a video. And it was just like a continuous sort of bit of video shot on a camcorder walking around New York. And, instead of just like a kind of a YouTube clip with the artwork and the song, which is what usually is the case, but it was just this kind of continuous bit of film that was playing throughout the album. You could just like have that on in the background whilst listening to it. And I just thought that's such a nice concept to have something that will entertain people in sort of, so even if the music's shit, they've got this like nice stuff to watch. So yeah, like each song had its own series of clips, and it was all filmed by friends of mine, mostly footage that people had filmed during COVID. So a lot of it's just like, in deep lockdown. And Soph, she contributed some stuff, which was just like her wandering around London, filming stuff when it was just like in deep lockdown and there was no one on the streets and stuff like that. And just had some friends go on like nice walks. And my friend Nicola, who I used to play in Doe with, she moved over to the States. So she was over there and just like walking around Brooklyn, taking like video and stuff like that. So it was just really nice to have a bit of a kind of insight into what my friends' lives were like during lockdown and then piece that together in a sort of kind of record of it. Yeah, that's kind of like a time capsule, because it's like, this is what was going on then and this is what we're all doing kind of thing.
That album, I believe it made it onto Good Morning America's best albums of 2021, but not only in the charts of that list, it was like number 2, only behind Billie Eilish. How does that happen?
It's me and Billy. Well, that's what happens. You've got to release a record on VHS, then good things will happen. It's me and Billy chilling in the top 2 spots. The guy who wrote those things for Good Morning America was a particularly big fan of like Doe and then Supermilk. We became sort of like almost kind of like, we've never actually met in person, but kind of like, you know, pen pals, like sending each other bits of music and stuff like that. So he was always really very sweet, like making sure that he used that position to kind of feature a couple of my bands and like our friends' bands and stuff, and just like expose a more mainstream audience to bands that might not otherwise get the attention.
That's great, that is.
Yeah.
In today's world, do you see like some feedback from that kind of exposure? Because if that had happened in like the late 80s or something like that, any mention like that on that kind of scale would have just sent so much focus onto you. In today's world, does something like that result in likes or follows or anything?
A tiny bit, but I think, I don't know, it's really difficult to cut through any sort of noise. Yeah, just like in this day and age, especially with social media now completely dominating everything we do and all sort of aspects of art and culture, and especially with like TikTok and stuff. This is probably a bit of a tangent, by the way, but like people thinking that the only way that they release music is to also kind of accompany it with some kind of video that is going to make them viral or some kind of like goofy skit or something like that. It's like holding anyone's attention is virtually impossible. And I feel like music press, as a result of all of that stuff, has changed so much that I think when that kind of stuff happens, as nice as it is and as lovely and sort of like gratifying as it is to have people write about you or say nice things, it doesn't really translate into real world fandom, which is a shame, because as you say, like in the sort of 80s, 90s, even like early 2000s, that would very much be the case. It would be, you know, that would be quite a big thing that would probably gain you quite a lot of traction. But I think there's just such an overwhelming amount of stuff being made and put online, and anyone can, you know, it's a great thing that anyone can do stuff and make it. And it's the very sort of spirit of DIY, really. But yeah, it's quite overwhelming. So I think it's, really difficult to sort of cut through to people sometimes, even with like really nice little mentions like that in quite big outlets.
The guy knows what he's talking about as well.
Yeah, for sure. He's got really good taste, and he's like a very, like the way he writes and the way he sort of describes each release, he really pays attention. He's very like, yeah. So his name's Alan Rabel. I'll give him a little shout out here because he's now kind of got his own, he left sort of ABC News and Good Morning America. He's just got his own website now where he does a similar sort of like roundup each year. So it's kind of continuing doing what he was doing for those big outlets, but just like for his own gratification and sort of enjoyment of it.
More people like him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a shame there's not, or if there are, I feel like, you know, because there used to be so much more independent, like, you know, even when Doe was first a band, and that was only like 10 or so years ago, there was way more people, even the bigger outlets were spending more time covering smaller bands. And there was just a lot more coverage and a lot more gateways into getting to people via the music press for like small DIY bands like Doe or Supermilk or like any of our mates, really. And, you know, even wormed our way into like Kerrang and Enemy and all those kind of places. But I feel like now all of those outlets tend to focus more on just like big names. So it's kind of like a safety net, because everyone's sort of panicking about how to keep things afloat and make money. And I feel like the pressure is just to kind of like keep it big names. So you don't get quite as many people writing about small, obscure bands anymore, which is a bit of a shame.
I need to ask, releasing this album on VHS, I've seen some photos. What tapes did you have to sacrifice for the cases? Because I noticed a CBS Fox one.
Yes, yeah.
Which you'd had to put a sleeve into. So which went by the wayside?
Oh, good spot. No, there was so for that particular release, I actually just found a sort of job lot on eBay of coloured cases. The yellow ones are almost always from Simpsons sell-through VHS tapes, and then the red ones more often than not are like 101 Dalmatians movie. So yeah, it was just like it was a whole mishmash of, and like, you know, people just got a random colour. It wasn't like, you know, you couldn't pick your colour. It was just like, oh, you take this one, this one. But when I've made like bootlegs and stuff, And, since when we've done a few more copies of the VHS, it's usually, I will sometimes sacrifice a couple of my own tapes and then put them into see-through cases, which I'm like, oh man, fucking see-through.
I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I feel like the general consensus, I think I've probably asked people on those forums as well, or the groups, like, what do you think about see-through cases? And everyone's like, fuck off, see-through cases. I'd rather have everyone's very snippy about small box or big box. And like people are usually like, I'd rather have like a coloured small box than a see-through big box. Fuck that. So many opinions on it.
Are you still a tape collector today? Do you still find yourself scouring for tapes, or have you got your collection and you're happy with it?
I think for a few years now, more due to being really busy with the music stuff and also lack of space, I haven't bought any new tapes for a little while, but I'm always looking, I'm always scouring, just like window shopping. And every now and again, like my friends Jen and Harriet, who used to play in a band, or I think they might still play in it, called Colour Me Wednesday, they're big car boot sale enthusiasts. So they're always, whenever they go to those, they're sending me pictures of stuff that people have got there. Like Soph is a big fan of Leslie Nielsen and like all of the sort of Airplane, Police Squad, all of the Naked Gun movies. So the last time Jen and Harriet were there, they picked up like Naked Gun 2, which comes in a very nice like pink box, and like Airplane. And so like every now and again, if they send through pictures and there's something really cool there, I'll be like, yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure there's space. Don't worry about it. But I haven't added to my nasties collection for quite some time. I've got, like my kind of Grail tapes on the shelf.
Can't make us jealous. Which ones are some of your favourites?
Let's see. I think Blood Feast is one of my favourite tapes that I've gotten, just like out of all of the nasties, being like the original, or, one of the original Gore movies, is still just like, it's absolute bollocks, but also just like in such an enjoyable way. The blood is so red. It's just like so...
Just look at this blood.
Yeah, it's just like... Ugh. But it's so like, especially you think about when that was released and how sort of shocking that must have been at the time, like that kind of level of gore, even though it's quite hokey by today's standards, it's still like really great to watch, because it's like, wow, this must have been really sort of revolutionary.
Where'd you find that tape?
I think that was an eBay find, but I was bidding against someone from the video club or like the preset group or something, and they were like, well played. And then I was like, oh, thanks. Like, he was like, yeah, I'll let you have that one because I've already got 7 copies of I'm like, oh, great. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks very much. And I've got a copy of Snuff, which is, the much sought after Snuff. But it's I feel like that tape seems to be the most divisive tape in the entire sort of collector's sphere. There's so many opinions on that tape, whether it was originally kind of like, leaked by Astra when they kind of like pulled it, whether it was like bootlegged by them or whether it was bootlegged by like, Dutch bootleggers or whatever. And there's so many different, there's like the round corner label variant, the square corner one.
You suddenly become like a Star Wars figure collector when it gets into that kind of realm, all the variants.
Yeah, I know, right? And VHS arguably take up so much more room than like Star Wars figures as well. So it's like, but yeah, that's that one, and Zombie Flesh Eaters, which, isn't particularly, it's not one of the rarest tapes. It's fairly easy to come by, but just the box art alone, and especially if it's got the kind of the Vipco kind of like sticker, like, warning contains graphic, whatever, like on the front. Yeah, it's just like a nice piece for the shelf.
Nice shelf piece.
Yeah, just that kind of like hand, and you've got like...
For the dinner party.
Yeah, here you go. Like, check out... Would you like some more caviar and Bordeaux? Here's a Zombie Flesh Eaters.
Where was your local video shop back in the day?
Been in London for 20 years.
Wow.
And originally from just outside of Braintree in Essex. But yeah, I moved to London when I was 17. So yeah, actually like 21 years I've been in London. But my local video shop, there was one in Braintree, and it was a Choices. And that was the one that we went to most frequently, that I sort of remember really vividly, like the layout and the smell, which eventually started doing DVDs and films, and then kind of, gradually shut down and is now a Subway. I think like last time I was back in Braintree, I went to scour it out and I was like, oh, it's this building, and it's just a Subway now. So I feel like it's quite depressing. But they can't last forever. It was there in like Dunmow in Essex. There was one. Then there was another one in Braintree which did like SNES games as well, which was like perfect. You go and like rent a movie and then like rent Beavis and Butthead for the SNES, or like The Lion King or Aladdin, or like one of those games, and then just come away with like, it was like a whole weekend's worth.
You're set for the weekend for sure then, yeah. I saw you also launched your own clothing line as well, Sparse City, and you did a Freaked t-shirt, the awesome Alex Winter film, and early orders came with a custom tape, right?
Yeah, there was a couple. So I did the shirt first, and then as a kind of a way to sort of flog the rest of them, I did like a custom bootleg.
Because that's a hard tape to come by as well.
It is, yeah. Like I've got the sell through of it, but I've been after like the ex-rental version for ages, and it's like whenever it pops up on eBay or like even on one of the groups, it's snapped up very quickly.
There's a bunch of us with it in the saved searches, probably.
Yeah, they've just got like as soon as it comes up. People are really savvy with that kind of thing. I'm a bit sort of slow. I'll just kind of like go on and manually search for a bit and then realize something's gone and be like, fuck. But yeah, that's my favorite movie, like hands down my favorite movie of all time.
Of all time?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. It holds a very sort of special place. The first Supermilk album, Death is the Best Thing for You Now, that was named after a line, like a cut line from Freaked. It was just before COVID all kind of kicked off. And me and a couple of my friends went to see a screening of Freaked with not Alex Winter, but Tom Stern, the other guy who made it, and sort of like presenting it and doing a Q&A and stuff. And I brought along a copy of the record to give to him and stuff. And now we're like Instagram friends and keep in touch every now and again, which is quite sweet.
How did you first get exposed to that film? Because it's not one that not many people know about, even though it's like from Alex Winter, Bill and Ted, Lost Boys and all that kind of thing. It's such a strange film, but an amazing cast and effects.
I know, it's incredible. I feel like it's so underrated even today. Like every now and again it will have this resurgence where like someone on YouTube will do like like, have you seen this film? And then like it kind of garners a whole legion of new fans, but it's still, it's not on any of the streaming services or anything like that. I think it was through my local video shop back when they used to have the magazines, that you could flip through and it told you what was coming up. I was already really into Bill and Ted. Like my dad took me to see Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey when it came out of the cinema when I was like really, really young. And I was like so sort of blown away by it. Like, even though they're all great, got a real affection for all of them. I feel like Bogus Journey is by far my favorite because it's got like a slightly darker take on it. All of the kind of weird effects with the robots and when they're kind of ripping open their chests, it just, show all like the wires and stuff. Really good soundtrack with like Faith No More and Primus.
Killer soundtrack, man.
But yeah, like I was already into that. And then there was like a tiny little bit written about it in the Choices, monthly or weekly sort of video magazine saying like, oh, this is coming to the shops in a couple of weeks' time. And I was like checking the shop every week to see if it come in, and it finally came in and we rented it. And I was just like, oh, this is everything I want in a film. It's like goofy, it's weird, gross. It's just like the colors are just all like, intense, saturated. There's lots of like prosthetic effects. And yeah, it's such a good film. I feel like it really found its audience through video rental and on VHS because it was so shelved by the studio when it came out and it had such a limited release. And even though it was kind of like well received when it came out, it sort of died a quick death. And then when it eventually, like a year later resurfaced on VHS, it was that's where it really kind of reached people.
It needs like a Arrow re-release or something. I don't know who owns the rights to it. Even getting it on DVD, I think, is pretty tough sometimes.
I think Tom Stern, when I spoke to him last, he said that because 20th Century Fox has now been absorbed by Disney, technically Disney now owns the rights to Freaked, which is really funny. But they've got the rights that you can purchase if you wanted to do a screening of it. But as far as I know, I did look into the sort of prospects of how would one try and do like a DVD release of this? And I quickly gave up because I realized it would cost way too much money. But like
for about like 5 people to buy it.
Yeah.
You're there on the side of the street. Buy this film.
Buy this fucking strange movie. You will hate it. But my friend Zach, who used to work for FOP, he was quite good friends with a lot of people at Arrow. And he was even kind of like asking people like, hey, would Arrow be interested in this movie? And they're like, nah, not really. So it's like, if Arrow's not interested, who the fuck's going to put it out? Like 88 films or something.
One thing that's made some headlines recently is, and you've been speaking about it, is your diagnosis with MND, Motor Neurone Disease, ALS. Something I think you've mentioned, you were getting like slight symptoms for a few years, but only earlier this year the doctors confirmed what it was. But I think you said that was that like a pretty fast diagnosis though compared to some cases, even though you can trace it back to a few years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially like I talk to quite a lot of people in the States where it's more commonly known as ALS, because like ALS is like, the specific type, which is the most common type of motor neuron disease. So usually when people say motor neuron disease, they're usually referring to ALS and they're kind of like interchangeable. I think in the States especially, it sometimes takes people like upwards of 4-5 years before they get a proper diagnosis. I know like a few people in this country that it took them quite a while. So I think it was about 2 and a bit years from when I, to where I can trace back the first symptoms. So in the grand scheme of things, I think it was quite a quick diagnosis, and it's sort of helped by the fact that or not helped by the fact that I've got a very slow progressing form of it. So even though I've been experiencing these symptoms, like usually I think people are quite fast progressing. And from when they first notice symptoms, it's not long before they're, unable to kind of walk, or they have to use a wheelchair. Sometimes, it's quite quick for their speech and their swallowing and all the, all this kind of stuff to very rapidly decline. But in contrast to that, I think it's now probably over 3 years since I had my first symptoms, and I'm still walking very badly, like very slowly. I can't run, I can't jump anymore or anything like that, but can still kind of get around with a cane. And stairs are, some certain stairs are an absolute no-go now, because like I can't use any stairs that don't have a suitable railing, or if they're kind of too deep, or even like ramps that are too steep, unless there's some kind of suitable thing that I can hold on to, like I'll just stack it. So like I can't really do that anymore. But yeah, because it was so slow progressing, early doctors sort of didn't pick up on it at all. And they were like, oh, it's probably just this, we'll give you some physio, we'll send you to some experts to check it out. But like I wouldn't worry too much.
Because I think you said for you getting that diagnosis almost makes it easier to deal with, because you're not continually searching for what might be wrong. You're not questioning yourself all the time, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even though to say that I felt like relief and was almost sort of happy in a way when I got the diagnosis, it's kind of weird to say, because, it's like technically classed as a terminal illness, because it's usually like when people have it, it will be what kills them eventually. But it was so much better getting that news compared to just experiencing all of these things and gradually kind of experiencing your body starting to get weaker, and like, your limbs not working as well, and just not having any answers.
Yeah, you've almost got a focus rather than, we've got to do some more tests to see what this is. You've got that focus, right? Okay, how do I move on from now I know what it is?
Yeah, exactly. And even though, there's not really much that can be done about it at this stage, they still don't have a cure for it. There's still, there's lots of really exciting kind of promising trials and treatments and stuff in the works, but there's still only one medication over here that is licensed to treat it. And even that, it kind of is only designed to kind of extend life by like a few months. It slows the progression down by about 10%, which is pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But like, despite all of that, it's just nice to know what it is, because it's nice to know what your limitations are and what you might be looking at, so you can kind of prepare yourself for it. But yeah, I was sort of going mad, really. Like, you almost kind of think, like, is this in my head? Like, is this some kind of hysteria type thing where I'm kind of making all of this up? Because everyone, around you kind of very well-meaningly goes like, oh, no, don't worry about it. Especially if you're kind of prone to fretting and they know that. But yeah, it was a big relief to have that diagnosis, and then for them to go like, okay, we're going to look after you now. Like, we're going to schedule this appointment. We're going to do this for you and stuff. And yeah, so that was good, I suppose.
I became aware of it through the guitarist Jason Becker in the early 1990s when he was playing with David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
I've been following his journey ever since.
He's still alive, isn't he?
Yeah.
Still composing and stuff, I think, even.
Yeah. He's got an amazing documentary, came out in 2012, I think it was. Like, he still has like loads of guitarists he's influenced go and visit him and all that kind of thing. Yeah, bit of a legend. And your dad has been a bit of a star, I believe, in raising awareness.
Yeah, that's right. He's because he was doing that anyway, because he's been a very keen marathon runner my entire life. But he's 75 now, and because of some sort of health issues, he's slowed down on the marathon front and doesn't really do too much actual sort of running anymore. But he does like power walking to make sure that he's still getting his exercise in. And because he's retired, he gets, he just likes to do stuff and get outdoors and keep active and stuff. So he set himself the challenge end of last year to do 5K, like power walk 5K a day for a few months. And then when I got diagnosed, he was like, right, I'm going to extend this to a year. And then like, I'll see if I can kind of use this to drum up some funds for the MNDA, Motor Neurone Disease Association. Yeah, and like people have been super generous kind of donating to his cause, and he's been on BBC News because of it, and like in the paper and stuff, and it's just like really, it's really sweet, because he's a really good dude, and like, I love my dad very much, and he's just like a real someone I look up to immensely. And then just to kind of have him take the wheel like that and be like, right, okay, let's bring some positive out of this, like is really cool. So it's nice to see that like his story as well has sort of got that traction and it's got legs and made its way around. That's really nice.
What was the preparation for you going into the last series of dates with your situation? Was you just like, let's just see how I get on?
It's weird because like I've always taken for granted the fact that I've always been a bit lazy with practice, and very lucky that usually I can kind of do all right on tours and stuff like that without too much sort of prior preparation. But yeah, for the last tour, I was practicing quite a lot and, practicing the whole set through to make sure my sort of hands and arms were kind of well prepped. And now I've got, so, if you go for a tattoo, you get like the tattooist armrests. They can rest their arm whilst they're doing like a really long bit of work. I bought one of those that kind of extends to the height that I need to kind of rest my arm, because the tops of my arms and my shoulders have got very weak. So being able to kind of extend my arm for long periods of times to kind of, play bass and reach further down the neck is kind of quite reduced. So I bought one of those. So I've basically got like a thing that kind of supports my arm from that angle. And then I can kind of come off of it if I need to, and then kind of lean on it when I need to get further down the neck and stuff like that. As well as that, it acts as a bit of a body stabilizer. So I spent quite a lot of time just becoming comfortable with this new sort of stage setup and relearning how to play certain bits with the limitations. Yeah, that was the kind of prep that went in. And, as well as the usual sort of all four of us playing in a room, just making sure we were comfortable and stuff. But yeah, I'm just trying to find any way I can really to kind of extend how long I can do it for.
I mean, it's all you've known. How long you been touring now?
I think I went on my first like proper tour when I was 19.
Wow, man.
Nearly 20, it'll be 20 years next year. But I've been playing in bands and stuff since I was 11. I think I played my first show in 11, which was 97. At like my local youth club, which is funny because I've got a couple of friends who were born that year. So I'm like, the year you were born, I was playing my first show in some kind of shitty like youth club in Headingham in Essex.
So I want to end by throwing it back to movie and video talk, and I want you to time travel a little to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s, and you're heading back to that video store. Choices. What movie soundtrack do you have on your Walkman, and what 3 tapes are you going to rent for the weekend?
It's a tough one because I know we've already talked about the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack, which is really fantastic, but I think I've got to choose. I don't know if this would technically fall into early 90s. I think it might still do, but the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack.
Great choice, man.
Yeah, which is always, it was my sort of family's. Oh, actually, it's a toss-up between the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack or the Angus soundtrack. They re-released it on vinyl like a few years back. I've got that version of it, but it's just like all killer, no filler on that soundtrack in particular.
For people who've not seen it, I mean, I know the Goo Goo Dolls are on that one. Or Green Day on it.
It's like Green Day, Ash, Weezer, The Muffs, Dance Hall Crashers, Goo Goo Dolls. It's like real kind of 90s alternative rock / pop punk kind of stuff. It's really, really good.
Well, you can have one on going and one on coming back, you see. Just take a slow walk.
Oh, that's right. Okay. It'd be Dumb and Dumber on the way there, which is, and yeah, Dumb and Dumber, and then like Angus, which is a bit more upbeat on the way back when I'm kind of like itching to get home with the tapes.
Like when you've seen a Rocky film and you come out after seeing all the training montages, you're running home.
It's exactly like that.
So what 3 tapes you going to go for?
Oh, it'll have to be Freaked, just because we've mentioned it.
No one else ain't going to be renting it. It's always going to be there.
We'll be like, that's that fucker again. That's the only person who ever comes in. He's rented this like 27 times this week. It'd be Freaked because I, discovered that on VHS, so that seems appropriate. Tank Girl, which is another one of my favourites, which I also discovered on VHS.
You're shining a light on a specific time period of films and music, right?
All of the goofy like box office flops that the studios put like huge amounts of money into, and it's like really high budget.
And throwing all the neon colours on it.
Yeah, very neon.
They're like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures on VHS.
Yeah. It's that kind of thing, just like melted plastic on video. But yeah, Tank Girl. And for a third one, I would say Serial Mum.
You're rocking a t-shirt, right?
Oh yeah, I've actually been wearing this t-shirt for too many hours. This was another one, that I did via Spa City, actually, the Serial Mum one. But that's another movie that I sort of discovered John Waters and all of his like whole back catalogue and, future movies through my family renting Serial Mum and just like absolutely loving it. Like all three of like, my mum and dad and me renting that and just being in absolute hysterics. And yes, that's a really special one. And like that was a particular kind of like gateway tape into a sort of lifelong fascination with John Waters and like, fandom there. So that'll be my third one.
Excellent choices, man. That's a weekend you've sorted there.
Yeah, actually, I might go watch all of those. Now I've got no job to return to. I think I might just spend the day watching those.
I love it. Jake, thanks for talking with me, mate. It's been awesome.
Oh, dude, thank you very much for having me. Thanks for talking to me. Oh, yeah, it's been really fun.
Huge thanks to Jake Popyura of Supermilk for chatting with me on this week's podcast. The new album from Supermilk, High Precision Ghosts, is out on August the 9th, and all info can be found at supermilk.band. Jake's awesome clothing line, Spa City, can be found at sparcity.co.uk, and please consider checking out the MNDA over at mndaassociation.org. Really enjoyed my chat with Jake, and so cool to connect with other VHS fans, so shout out to Rixie from the Stay Awakes for putting him on my radar. Also wanted to give a shout to everyone who attended our 80s Video Shop's second birthday event this past weekend. So fun to have movie poster artist Paul Shipper at the shop, along with Jack Horrorhound and Galveston, to meet everyone. It was a really great turnout, and I look forward to more events soon, including the big Tape Stock 2 event on October the 5th. Please keep up to date on all social media at 80s Video Shop, and hope to see some of you there real soon. So that's all for this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll come back next time as we close in on 300 episodes. There may or may not be the odd week or so between episodes, but they'll be without doubt worth the wait. So till then, please make sure to always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.